Why shouldn't Black women adore Black men? I'm sorry, why shouldn't Black men adore Black women and vice versa? What's wrong with that? This information that you and I have, the knowledge that we have, we should be building African-centered institutions.
What do you think is one of the best investments somebody can make in 2022?
What I would want to encourage is for every family to start a business.
With a small drop in yield, only minor dents in the season's spike.
Okay. Welcome to Flyshikis TV. I'm your boy Flood, the Alkaline Investor. Today we have here Dr. Ma'at, and she's here to kind of give us an understanding of different topics and different things and different questions that we kind of have came up for her to answer. And first I want to allow her to introduce herself, and then we're kind of going to jump right on in, just like we usually do.
All right, peace and love, family. Peace and love, family. As he stated, my name is Dr. Adwao Ma'at, and I am a professor. I'm actually an educator at the School of Engineering at Morgan State University. And so I'm an educator there. I'm also a mother. I'm also a businesswoman, a native of Baltimore, Maryland, born and raised in Maryland, and also educated in the Baltimore public school system. I have a company called EdAnime Productions, which creates educational programs for children. And I'm not sure if you heard, brother, of Meltrek. That is our flagship project. Mel is short for melanin. Trek means journey. So we're taking you on a journey to understand the history, culture, and achievements of melanated people. And so again, it's a whole series. It's a series that's comprised of animated films, activity books, storybooks, and a whole curriculum dedicated to teaching our babies our story through our lenses. And so Meltrek is currently being utilized in 10 countries and 30 states. So we have that going on. I also, I'm also the creator of Conscious Ingenuity, which is a program that utilizes STEAM to build character, confidence, and capabilities. That program is now being utilized in several schools in Baltimore City. We're getting ready to deploy the program in Ghana in September. And so we're also creating a virtual version of the program so that children who don't live in Baltimore, who don't dwell in Baltimore, will be able to access the program. And so we're going to launch the virtual version of the program, hopefully in June. Nice.
That's good to hear. I didn't know that. That's definitely something I'm going to check into after this interview for sure. Well, we like to jump right on into Flyshikis. I don't want to hold you too long. You kind of already answered a little bit of my first question, and that was kind of like where you from and kind of where you grew up. Being that you are a native to Baltimore, I'm actually a DMV native. I'm in Virginia right now, so yeah, I bounce all around Virginia, DC, Maryland. So I'm familiar with the area for sure. But my question is, how did you experience life growing up as a Black woman in America, especially Baltimore?
Oh my goodness. Well, growing up as a Black woman, but then growing up as a dark-skinned Black woman, we can't forget that, right? And so it's looking back on my childhood relationships and childhood experiences and realizing that, wow, that was colorism, but I didn't know what to call it, at that time. But, and looking back, it's wow. So, growing up, like you said, a Black woman in America, that's, first of all, you're Black, and then you're a woman. And so you're dealing with racism, you deal with sexism. And then I came from, a lower middle class family. So now we're dealing with classism, right? So you got racism, classism, and sexism. Again, like I said, growing up, you don't know how to qualify these things that you see and that you experience. But, as you get older, give thanks and you grow in knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. You look back and you say, okay, so this is what it was. So I remember just growing up in having an inconsistent father. So having daddy issues, somewhat daddy issues, and looking at males, wanting to beat up on males because mad with pops. never wasn't a feminine girl. Never was a feminine woman. Never was a feminine little girl. Grew up around all boys. So then, being called a tomboy. You a tomboy? I don't know what that is. I'm just out here hanging. I'm just out here hanging with the fellas. I'm out here hanging with the fellas. You a tomboy? You a tomboy? So growing up like that, growing up a little rough. And then, being teased because of your complexion. I don't know if you're too young to remember. We used to have these crack battles and everything. You so black, or your mama so black, and so it was. But not understanding again that this is all colorism, right? That I was experiencing, and colorism that we were indulging in. But it was rough, it was rough. And then trying to, grow up and figure out who you are and what your identity is, and kind of just going through what I guess other little girls go through, just trying to figure out who are you and what do you identify with and as, and trying to figure some things out. But just happy that the ancestors brought into my life the work of Dr. Anthony T. Browder, who woke me up at the age of 15. So around 15, that's when I guess you would say I became woke, or I started my journey into consciousness, or into becoming conscious. But Anthony T. Browder's work was the spark for me. I was actually downtown in Baltimore City, hanging with my friends at a place called Lexington Market. And this is like downtown in the Inner Harbor, where a lot of people hang out. There's a lot of traffic there. People are selling different things. You have an outside market out there when during the spring and the summer. And so I was hanging out there and hanging with my friends, and a gentleman was selling books. And we walked he called us over to his table to see, he called us over to his table to really promote his books, and he wanted us to buy some books. And at that time, I wasn't interested in grabbing any books, and neither were my friends. And so we walked away, and he said, you.
Yeah.
Who, me? Yes, you.
He was talking to you.
Yeah, he said, come here. He said, come here. So I went back over there to him, and he said, I want to give you this book. And he handed me From the Browder File by Anthony T. Browder. And, the book sat on my dresser for a while. But what made me want to read the book is that he said to me, Erykah Badu hands these books out at her concerts. And at that time, you're talking like 95, 96. Erykah was huge, like in 96. Yeah. So when he said Erykah Badu hands the books out at her concerts, I said, oh man, I want to read this. And so again, I took it home. It sat on my dresser for some time. And I remember one day looking at it and becoming curious about the cover. Like, who is this? What is this being on the cover? And so when you open up the book, he does explain within the first couple of pages the person or the figure that you see on the cover. And then I started reading the different, I want to say articles, because it's really like a book comprised of different articles that talk about different things. He talked about melanin. He talked about Kemet, and that being the oldest civilization. And it was a civilization founded by African people, Black African people. He talked about the politics of hair and how the way we wear our hair, we're making a political statement. And that's when I decided to go natural and lock my hair. I never got a perm after I read the book by Anthony T. Browder. I never perm my hair after that. And that's been over 25, 26 years ago. And so he also in the book talked about religion and Christianity. He talked about the Council of Nicene. He talked about the Nicene Council, or Council of Nicene. He talked about that. He talked about holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, all of these different holidays or holy days that we celebrate that have nothing to do with African people. And so literally, that book changed my life, and it put me on the path that I'm on now. And so I give thanks for the work of T. Browder.
That's perfect. I actually was going to ask you kind of what sent you into this abyss of kind of gaining knowledge, and you kind of answered that question. And we're going to get to that a little later on as well, kind of what books you recommend for people that kind of might be starting out, because I just kind of got handed a couple speeches by Haile Selassie. And that was how I kind of got into digging deeper and figuring out exactly who I was as well. So I know everybody kind of has their own story about how they, you know, transition from one side to the other and started to kind of like get a good understanding of who they are. So that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
And you know what, brother, and I just want to chime in and say that it's we have to break the cycle of having to unlearn, relearn, and learn. We have to break that cycle. And that's why African-centered education is extremely important. So like you said, we all have our stories. You have your story on how you got woke. I have my story on, you know, the catalyst that, you know, that woke me up, right? That sparked my you know, my consciousness or broke those chains of psychological slavery, as Dr. Naeem Akbar would say. But we have to stop that cycle. We have to break that cycle of having to grow older, and then someone or something comes along, and then it sparks our interest. We should be, this information that you and I have, the knowledge that we have, we should be building African-centered institutions, which we are. Shout out to Marcus Klein with the Freedom Home Academy. Salute to and Yoko, Mama and Yoko, and Baba Amin with the Uhuru Academy. Peace to, you know, you got Baba Baruti and Mama Ya Baruti with the Akabin, you know, Institute. So we do have some African-centered schools, weekend schools, and Monday through Friday schools. But there should be an African-centered school in every district, in every city, wherever Black children are. And that is the only way that we can break this cycle. So it shouldn't be that, oh, we go through life and we turn 15, 20, 25, 30, 40, and we hear a radio show, or we come across a book, or like you said, come across some speeches, or come across something in order to wake us up. We should be cultivated. You know, you get what I'm saying? We should be brought 100%. Up with this. We should be brought up with this knowledge. And so that's a big issue in the Black community that we have to address.
I agree with you. It's because it's kind of like you starting off 10 spaces behind, and you got to kind of go backwards in order to kind of go forward. So, you know, you give yourself a huge disadvantage that way. So I definitely agree with you 100% on that. I keep hearing you reference like having centers that are like African themed or African based to kind of like give people an understanding of their history as somebody who doesn't actually live or even have an understanding of some sort of African culture where they come from. My question is then, what's your understanding and what's your take on foundational Black Americans, and do you consider yourself one?
Well, by definition, I am one. I mean, given the definition of foundational Black Americans, I am a foundational Black American, right? Like I was born and raised here in America. My family from down south, my family's from Sumter County, South Carolina. And so when you talk about FBA or ADOS, you know, I mean, I consider myself just an African. I consider myself an African woman, yes. But just like in Africa, you have different tribes. You have different tribes. You have Ashanti, you got Igbo, you got Bamaliki, you have Zulu. I mean, it's different. I don't even want to say tribes, but different ethnicities. Even though they're African, you have different tribes, different ethnicities in the Pan-African, under the Pan-African umbrella. And so arguably, we can't act like African-American people we've been over here for over 400 years. I mean, if you go back to 1526, you want to say 1526, so 500 years almost that we've been here. So arguably, we have become a distinct ethnic group, no different than Yoruba, no different than Igbo, no different than Ashanti, no different than Bamaliki, no different than any of those other ethnicities. But what I find strange is that people can't accept that. It's like, you know, the African American is supposed to just say, "Oh, we're just African," and just leave it alone. Like we're not supposed to have an identity, and that's the issue that I have. I am an African first and foremost, but I do belong to an ethnicity that falls underneath the umbrella, right, of African ethnicity. So, like I said, just like you have Igbo and all of these Igbo and Yoruba and all of that, then you have the African American. We're just another tribe within the Pan-African community, but it seems like a lot of people can't accept that. But by definition, am I a foundational Black American? I am absolutely a foundational Black American by definition. I was born and raised in America. My mother, my father, born and raised in America. We can trace our lineage all the way back to the plantation. So my father's side, his side came from Maryland Eastern Shore, where they would bring slave ships in the Maryland Eastern Shore. Right. And so, yeah, and then my grandfather on his side migrated to Baltimore, and then she met my grandmother who came from North Carolina, had my father. Then on my mother's side, both of her parents came from Sumter County, South Carolina. And we remember that the slave ships came into Charleston, right? South Carolina. And so, and then my family ended up migrating, going upward, which end up settling in Sumter County, South Carolina. So by definition, I'm absolutely, an FBA, ADOS, African American, whatever you want to call our tribe. There's so many labels. There's so many labels out there now. People say you're African American, you're FBA, you're ADOS, but whatever the term is that says, hey, you were born and raised in America and you've been here for over 500 years. You are literally the descendants of the ancestors who came from Western Central Africa and who were brought here against their will, and you end up landing here. You worked here you worked on plantations from Kansas to Kansas. You fought in every war. You were a part of the Reconstruction. You were a part. That is that is FDA. I'm sorry, FBA. Yeah. That is ADOS. Fought in every war. Was here through every era: chattel slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, civil rights, Black Power movement, mass incarceration, drug. Right. That is the FBA. That is the foundational Black American.
Right. Great answer. I also like to let people know, because there's a lot of evidence that supports that there were a lot of people who were considered to be natives and Black Africans on this continent before actually the slave trade as well. So I like to let a lot of people know that, all of the Black people that are here, I think it was even like less than 5% are people who came over on actually came over on a slave ship. So if you know anything about that, I would like for you to kind of touch on that a little bit and kind of give an understanding of the type of people who were on this land before there actually was colonization and, people brought over here on slave ships.
Well, yeah, 10% of the captured are Africans. Yeah, it was like 5 to 10%. So you were right, brother. About 5 or 10% of the captured or kidnapped Africans came to North America. The bulk of them went to the Caribbean and went to South America. That's first and foremost. Matter of fact, Brazil has the highest number of Africans today, just in Brazil. I think it's like 82 million or something like that. I think it's about 82 or 85, 82 or 80, 82 to 86, I'm gonna say, million Africans in Brazil. So they have outside of the continent of Africa, that particular country has the highest number of Africans. Now, there were Black and brown people, right, here in America prior to the arrival of Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus even stated in his diary that it was Africans who told him how to get here. He didn't even know how to get here. It was Africans, Black Africans, that told him how to get here. There's a book that I will want everyone to read, and it's called, I don't want to say They Came for Columbus, even though Dr. Ivan Van Sertima wrote They Came for Columbus. There was some things that he got wrong in that book, and so he followed that book up with a book called The Early Presence, the Early Presence, or the Early African Presence in America. And so that is the book that I would recommend that people should read, where he talks about the African presence in America before Christopher Columbus. But my brother Ankh and I, we always go back and forth, because he argues that, well, with technology, they didn't have the technology to get over here. So he goes back and forth. Well, which ships were they using, to get? And he raised a good point. He's saying, what ships can we find today, or which ships, or did they have in order to get over here? But my argument is always, we had access. Think about it. Columbus and them, they had caravel ships. And so you had Africans too. But then I told him just because they haven't uncovered the ships today doesn't mean that they may not uncover the ships 50 years from now, 100 years from now. So I told him, so he and I, we start battling. Yeah. Because a lot of things that we may not think are true today may be true tomorrow. And so I'm very careful with saying that things I used to be a very black and white person, right? It did happen or it didn't happen. But the more I grew in knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, I don't say that. I may say, hey, there may not be evidence available in this space and time that corroborates this, but you and I only here in this body for a limited amount of time. And so you and I may not be here to see them uncover Black African bones and skeletons right now, right? As they continue to excavate. But who knows what they're going to uncover in 50 to 100 years. All right. And so, yeah. And so again, people can check out, the book, the Early Presence of Africans. I think it's called Early African Presence in America by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. The Malian scholars contend that you had Abubakari. They said that he came over. He was the king of Mali. They said he came over in, I think I want to say 1312. He relinquished his throne and sent out, a fleet of ships. And so Malian scholars will tell you that he landed in Brazil. That's what Malian scholars say, that he left, he never came back, he relinquished his throne. And then, people say, well, where did he land? And Malian scholars are saying that they believe he landed in Brazil. Okay. And so, it's like I said, I haven't seen any hardcore evidence. I know we look at the Olmecs and people say, well, look at the Olmecs and look at the nose and look at the lips. But in my world, we call that lookership, where you just look and you say, you get what I'm saying? Because it's because that phenotype is not just indigenous to, it's not just endemic. I didn't mean to say indigenous. It's not just endemic to Black African people. When people think of Black African people, all of us don't have wide noses and thick lips. Like that's a stereotype. So to see the statue and say the statue looks African, I mean, that's a stereotype, right? Like people say, well, that's the phenotype of African people. Are you sure? Because it's a lot of ethnicities in Africa who don't have thick lips and wide noses. So what are you saying? And so anyway, I'm just not one for looking at Olmec heads and saying they're Black people, or seeing a picture of someone with dark skin and classifying that person as an African. Because I can show you a picture right now of someone who was born and raised in India with coily hair and dark skin, and they aren't sub-Saharan African people at all. They aren't us. So I'm really careful with that. But like I said, I always have these discussions with my boy, Brother Ankh, about the African presence in America. Again, going off of the journals of Christopher Columbus, going off of what Malian scholars have said about Abubakari, reading the work of Dr. Ivan Van Sertima and others. I wholeheartedly believe, and I'm using that word carefully, I wholeheartedly believe that there was an African presence in America prior to Christopher Columbus, prior to colonization and prior to enslavement.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, I even like, so what would you say to people who said, what about the structures like the pyramids in Mexico and, just the pyramids that we kind of find all around the world for that matter? Would you say that those actually come from some sort of African civilization, being that it's kind of like the oldest ones are found in Africa?
What I would say is I can't compare the pyramids in Mesoamerica to the pyramids in Africa. I'm actually going to take a trip down to Mesoamerica to check out some of those pyramids. I know there's some in Teotihuacan, Tenochtitlan. I'm probably butchering the names. I know I'm probably butchering the names, but you do have them, or I think there's some on the Yucatan Peninsula, but they all throughout Mesoamerica. I had the honor and privilege of going to Kemet with Anthony T. Browder this past December. My son and I, we went there. We were with him for 9 days, and on his sacred landscape of ancient African, ancient Egypt study tour. And so we went there and we were able to go to the temples. We were able to visit the pyramids. And so, I mean, I've looked at the pyramids in Mesoamerica, but just from looking at them online, I can't compare those pyramids to what we built in Nubia or in Kemet. And so I'm going to take a trip to go down there to see the pyramids with my own eyes. But I did have a friend who traveled down there, and he said it's no comparison. So to say that our ancestors built those, I don't know. I'll just say I don't know.
Okay. Understood. Over here at Flyshikis, we kind of like to focus on bridging the gap between Africa and all of its distant relatives. So that's kind of like how we try to approach having different conversations with people, if they're actually, from the motherland directly, or their ancestors are from the motherland, for that matter. So that's kind of the line of questioning that we had. I do believe that in order for us to fully access the power we have as a global community, there has to be some sort of like overall understanding between all of us. And, I just want to be a part of that push in that direction, even if it's a little bit of progress, it's progress, even if it's baby steps, So with that being said, I'm going to transition a little bit here into kind of a different side of the topics. How do you feel about the relationships between the Black man and the Black woman? And what do you think that both of them can do to kind of improve that?
Oh my goodness, that's a loaded question that you just asked. a very loaded question, because and it's something that needs to be discussed. Because if you look at the marriage rate, we're not marrying each other anymore. I think they said 26% or 26 or 27% of Black people are married. And then when you dig deeper into those stats, we do tend to marry each other when we do marry, but there has become an increase in interracial dating and intermarrying, interracial marriages amongst us as well. So it's kind of like, okay, we don't marry each other because 26 or 27% of Black people are actually married. And then when we do marry, we typically marry each other. But now you're seeing like this increase of interracial marriages within the Black community. And so the question becomes, why? What happened? Why aren't we marrying each other? Is it because of the breakdown of the family? Because remember, up until about the 60s or 70s, I think in the 60s or 70s, the rate was maybe like 80 or 81% of Black people were married. Yeah, you have to go back and check out the census data on that. Years ago, I did a lecture where I spoke on the Black family, and I talked about how the Black family is the oldest institution in the world. And so for us not to be marrying one another, you got to ask, well, what happened? Why don't we marry each other anymore? Right? Like I said, right now the marriage rate is like 26 is 27%. And I'm looking at my lecture that says only 27% of African American households are headed by married people. And this is according to the US Census Bureau in 2015. All right. And so you kind of got to ask yourself this. It says the majority of Black babies are being born, 72% are being born to unmarried mothers. Now, between 1890 and 1960, I want to say this again, between 1890 and 1960s, the marriage rate was 80%, which was actually higher, which was a higher percentage than all of white America. And so look at the time period between 1890 and 1960. That means that through Jim Crow, we were married. Through the Great Depression, we were married.
70 years.
Think about it. Yeah, we were married through Jim Crow. We were married through the Great Depression. We were married through the Civil Rights Movement and through the Black Power Movement, all the way up to 1960. Well, the Black Power Movement happened in late 60s, early 70s. So I would say up until through the Civil Rights Movement, we were married. So then you got to ask yourself, what happened? Well, remember they neutralized the Black liberation movements, right? The Black Power movements, and they began to flood the black
That
community.
was my first thing.
They flooded the Black community with drugs. They started locking up, Black men, right? They literally neutralized the Black family. They neutralized the Black family, in the 70s, in the 80s. And I wholeheartedly believe that when you don't grow up, and it may be some people mad at what I'm getting ready to say, when you do not grow up in a two-parent household, okay, or a healthy, I'll say, two-parent household, you don't value marriage. Because I'm going to be honest, when I grew up in a single-family household. And when I got old, I was like, my mother did it by herself. I mean, that was my attitude until I became conscious. I didn't have an appreciation for a two-parent household. So once they neutralized the family, right? You got all these women raising babies by themselves, right? Well, not raising babies by themselves, because Black fathers are actually the most active group of fathers. And so I don't want to say raising babies by yourself, but you have unmarried women. You get what I'm saying? Raising these babies. And so the father may be active, but he may not be in the household, or he may be in the household and they just not married, but it's not having that appreciation for each other. I believe I don't like to make blanket statements. So what I'll say is this: I would like to see more of Black men and Black women having a love for each other. And yeah, you get what I'm saying? Because I don't want to say we don't have it, because it's people out here who, it's a lot of brothers that I care about. They care about me, care about sisters. So I don't want to say that. But what I will say is I would love to see us have more of a love for each other, more of an appreciation for each other, valuing one another, where we actually value, like I'm talking about women valuing men valuing women. I remember listening to this YouTube, and I'll call her name out. Her name is Cynthia G. So Cynthia G always gets on Black women like myself. She says, you all are male-centered and you worship Black men. You all worship Black men. Well, let's look up the word worship. Let's look up the word. Let's look it up. Let's look it up, because she gets on us. We worship Black men. We're male-centered. That's what she calls women like me. So hold on. So to worship something, it says the feeling or expressions of reverence or adoration for a deity. So it's reverence, veneration, adoration, honor, adore. Why shouldn't Black women adore Black men? And why shouldn't Black women adore why shouldn't Black men adore Black women and vice versa? What's wrong with that?
Right.
So I'm telling you, this culture that we live in today, brother, is toxic.
So fake.
And it's so toxic. And I think it weighs on Black men and Black women, and it weighs on just our ability to have healthy relationships with each other. Some of us don't even know how to have healthy relationships with each other. You have some Black men, and I've talked to some who had terrible relationships with their mothers, their aunties, their grandmother. And so they grew up feeling some type of way. They grew up resenting Black women, and vice versa. You have some sisters who grew up, and had issues with dad, issues with uncle, issues with whomever. You get what I'm saying? And she ends up growing up and she's resenting Black men. And so we got to learn how to love each other, how to appreciate each other, and how to have a healthy relationship with each other. And what I mean by relationships, I'm not saying just intimate, yes, intimate, but even platonic relationships. We need to understand how to form healthy platonic relationships with each other. And we need to heal, brother. In order to do all of these things, we have to heal. It's a lot of sexual trauma that occurs in the Black community that we don't talk about. And right here in Baltimore, and peace be upon her soul, Dr. Patricia Newton, she talked about sexual trauma a whole lot and child molestation a whole lot. Reason being, she was an African-centered psychologist. She had a practice here in Baltimore. And she used to take people to Ghana, take people to Egypt, and run different trips. And so she just was when she transitioned, it was just a it's a huge void right now in Baltimore. She actually transitioned in 2020, September the 28th, 2020. And I talked to her like 3 months before she 2 months before she transitioned. But she often talked about the sexual trauma in the Black community. She said in Baltimore, and I remember this blew my mind. She said in Baltimore, 9 out of 10 girls are touched or sexually violated before the age of 18. 8 out of 10 boys are sexually violated by the age of 18 here in Baltimore. Then she started talking about what happens in Atlanta and how that's really the hub of pedophilia and sex trafficking and things of that nature. Yeah. And so can you imagine? So you have these people being violated, okay? And do you expect them to grow up and say, oh, I want to have a healthy relationship with the very same person, not person per se, but the sex that violated me? You know, she often talked about homosexuality and how she talked to over 6,000, I want to say 6,000 patients. And she saw that homosexuality was highly correlated with sexual trauma. You know, she said it got to a point where she said when LBGT people would come into her office, she would say, well, she used to ask, were you ever sexually violated? But she said it got to a point where she just asked who, because a lot of people from the LBGT community that she came in contact with, and I want to be specific because, you know, people say, well, everybody in LBGT was touched. The members that she came in contact with have been sexually violated. And so sexual trauma, that's something else that we definitely got to address in the Black community in order to, I guess, foster healthy relationships between Black men and Black women, because there's some distrust there. You know, a girl has been sexually violated by, a Black man, whether it be her, you know, some women are sexually violated by fathers, uncles, friends, cousins, or neighbors or So do you think she's going to have do you think she's going to be operating with the healthy perception of Black men? Absolutely not. And vice versa. You got young guys, who are 12, because boys get touched too. Young men get touched too. And so do you think they're going to be operating with a healthy perception of the opposite sex that was just fiddling on them or touching on them? No. And so again, in order to foster healthy relationships, we have to heal and put it into that sexual trauma, that sexual violation. So it's a lot. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot to unpack.
I got you.
When you talk about male, female, relationships, even thinking about this culture and how we get a lot of our ideas about relationships from white folks. I mean, now you got this dude, Kevin Samuels, on the internet talking about high value men and high value women, and you make $100,000 a year. That's high value. And I'm like, wow. So that's what we value now. That's what's value. So a high value man has to make $100,000, and so a high value woman, she has to not have any children. She has to be a certain age. She got to weigh a certain amount of pounds. She got to be a certain height. She has to be, wait a minute. So we have to get back to our ideas of what a relationship should be. What is a high value man in the traditional, African context? What was a high value woman in the traditional African context? And I bet my bottom dollar that high value people were people of good character. I think that good character and intelligence were probably at the top of that, right? And so, we got to get back to, teaching our children giving them a healthy criteria, right? To apply when it comes to looking for a mate, So what, are you teaching your son and your daughter to seek someone who's of good character, who has good intelligence, who's strong in his or her culture, who's African-centered, who's operating with a certain set of morals and values, who come from a certain family? We got to get back to that too. So like I said, it's so much to unpack when you talk about Black male and female relationships.
Do you believe that there is such thing as gender roles? I know that's kind of another loaded question, but you know, just for the sake of the argument is what you're saying about how like high value man, high value woman. I guess that like, you know, it kind of will be defined on what you kind of are looking for. Because, you know, I feel like at the end of the day, if somebody's weak at something and you find a partner that is kind of strong at your weak points, it doesn't really, you know, the gender roles can kind of change.
Compliments. And I'm sitting here as you're talking to me, I'm thinking about this book by Ife Amaduume, what's it called? Male Daughters, Female Husbands. And I know the title sounds crazy, like given this whole climate, but it's not what you think it's talking about. It's not any trans, it's not trans anything, but it's in the book, she talked about how you know, she talked about like gender roles and how in her particular ethnicity, and this sister is Igbo. Some people may say Igbo, or some people may say Igbo, but that's her ethnicity. And she talked about how they don't really trip on if you're a man, you're supposed to be this. She talked about how some men are very domestic. You know, they may take care of the house and the woman may be the breadwinner. She may be the one out there controlling the market and getting the money, and he may be in the house. Does that make him less of a man? I think that it's, I think that it should be about what's best for the household.
I agree.
Right? Like it should be about that. It's, you know, you're the man, you're supposed to be making X amount of money each year, and you're supposed to do this each year. And I mean, I think it's about, you know, all of our gifts and our abilities and how we can contribute to what's important. And that's securing food, clothing, and shelter and safety for our families. So it's working together to meet our basic physiological needs. And as long as we can do that together, you know, you play your role and I play mine. You play the role that's best suited for you, and I play the role that's best suited for me. But to say that, you know, you're supposed to make more money than me because we live in a patriarchal society that said so, because that's what that's patriarchy that we're talking about. And so it seems like to me, brother, as much as women claim that they don't like patriarchy, a lot of sisters operate with patriarchal ideals and values. So they'll say, oh, well, you know, on one hand, you know, I want to do this and I'm a woman, I can do this by myself. But on the next hand is, oh, I want a man that make more money than me. I want a guy to do. So it's like, wait a minute, sis, like, wait, you know, you're confusing. Yeah, pick one. So it's like, you know, on one end, you hate patriarchy, but on the next end, you're operating on one end. Like I said, on one end, you don't like patriarchy, but on the other end, you operate with patriarchal ideals and values, which confuses the hell out of brothers. So
true indeed. True indeed. So, you know, with that being said, I kind of feel like you, on a micro level, we all have to, at the very minimum, take care of our families, our immediate families. And, you know, one thing that can definitely put a stress and strain on that is finances. And, you know, like I said, I'm Flood, I go by Flood, but my name is the Alkaline Investor. And I'm the Alkaline Investor because I'm alkaline vegan, and I'm also a real estate investor. I'm a real estate investor that's alkaline vegan. So I say that to say this. What do you think is one of the best investments somebody can make in 2022 to kind of like cover that foundation of, you know, taking care of their families? One of the safest investments. How about that?
So your question, say that again to me, brother. You said, what's one of the safest investments?
What safest, the best investments that somebody can make in 2022? The smartest, how about that? The smartest investment.
Now, when you say investments, are we talking about money? Are we talking about time, energy? What are we talking about?
I'm talking about, well, I guess that's a good way you can answer. You can answer that either way. I was really speaking financially, but because like I said, we all have to, at the end of the day, we have to take care of our families, and, you know, it takes money to do that for the most part. Of course, you know, investing our time into, you know, learning or, you know, something else, it would be equally as valuable on a different scale. But at the end of the day, you know, people still have mortgages, people still have to pay rent, you still got to buy food, you still have to take care of the bare necessities or the very minimum what it takes for you to live. So being that, I know you understand how savvy investors can kind of like create some sort of passive income so that it will allow you to actually pursue your passion. So I want to know from you, what is one of the best investments that you would give to somebody else in 2022 to financially? Let's start with financial.
I mean, it's a number of things you can invest in. I mean, some people are investing in mutual funds. Some people are doing what's called FTX. Not FTX.
NFTs.
Yes. No. It's EFTs, right?
EFTs. The funds, the tokens.
Yeah, some people are doing that.
Yeah.
Right. Some people are doing that. Some people are doing stocks. People are doing real estate. Some people are investing in, I know a buddy who does in life insurance policies, because he said when his child turned a certain age, he's pulling the money out.
That's the
using
move.
that money. Right. He said he's doing that. So I think his daughter's like 8 years old. And so some people are investing in, you got life insurance policies. You have, and I think you're right. It's not EFTs, it's NFTs, right? I think that's what you said earlier. So NFTs, stocks, even though the stock market is down right now. I was up. Yeah. I was up a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago, and then I looked at my account like, whoa, So anyway, so you have stocks, you have NFTs, you have a lot of people going crazy. They were going crazy over Bitcoin. I don't know if that's what they're doing now. Real estate, right now, real estate is booming. It's a seller's market. And so can you imagine if you had some houses that you could flip right now? I mean, you would really make out. So you got real estate. And so it's a number of, and I just didn't want to name one thing, right? Like it's a number of different things that someone could invest in. I think what I would want to encourage is for every family to start a business. Every family, I believe, should start some sort of business that creates income for your family. I know that typically Black people will encourage their children, our babies, to get an education and get a job. I agree with Dr. Claude Anderson that we should get an education and go create jobs. And so I think that needs to be the mentality. Yeah, that's the mentality that needs to be inculcated in our children, that we train them or develop them in such a way that they aspire to work for self and employ self. And so the greatest investment for me that I would recommend is starting a business, some sort of business with your family. Yeah, with your family that will create income. Because I just had this conversation with my eldest son, Harvey, who has a business called Hockey Customs, where he customizes tennis shoes and he restores shoes and things of that nature. And he does pretty good for himself. I think he's like up to 90,000 followers on TikTok and 10,000 on Instagram. So he's doing his thing. But I've always encouraged him and my middle child, Isaiah, and even my youngest one, Jalen, to, I tell them all the time, you don't need a job. Like a job is one way. It's one means of creating income. And so, you can, if that's the route you want to go, you can. But what you really want to do is to create income. That's what it is. You can go get a job. That's one way. But what happens when your boss says you're fired? Or we have to lay you off. We have to do some cutbacks. We got to let you go. And so now you've created a life around this job that provided you with a certain income that permitted you to live a certain lifestyle. So what happens when that income is taken from you? And so I think the greatest
square one.
Yeah. So I think the greatest investment that one can make is starting a business with your family to create income for your family. It like literally, we paid our employees on Monday, and it felt good that my sons got a check. Not a check from white folks, working for white folks, but a check from them working for the family business.
Nice. And I 100% agree. Like I said, I'm a real estate investor, so I actually created my own business within the real estate market as a wholesaler. So, and I actually employ people in my community and friends and stuff as well. So I definitely understand that feeling, of giving back to people and allowing them to get a check that's cut from somebody that's, a friend or a family member or whatever. That's way more valuable than just getting a check where, coming from some job that you really don't even care about or putting any real energy into actually growing that business.
Absolutely.
I salute you on that. That was a great answer. And because I feel like there is no wealth in poor health, how much do you feel like diet plays a role in our society right now and how we're actually treating each other?
Oh my goodness, diet plays a huge role. Our diet is killing us right now, brother.
Yeah.
You are what you eat. You are what you eat. And so, salute to people like Dr. Sabi, salute to people like Baba Kidi Awadu, who looks great, by the way. I don't know if you've seen Baba Kidi Awadu, but he's in his 60s and this man looks phenomenal. But and these are, he's also a scholar along with Dr. Sebi, who talked about, and I'm sitting here thinking about Dr. Africa. Right, so you have Dr. Africa, you got Dr. Sabi, you got Baba Kidi Awadu, and others who are carrying the torch, and
Right.
So diet is extremely important. You are what you eat, and so it's imperative that we put things in our bodies that will help maintain our bodies, right? Like that'll keep us healthy. And so we got to watch this stuff. I mean, they're doing so much to the food. You got processed foods.
No, man.
Yeah, they're putting so much in the foods, from dyes to chemicals to all sorts of stuff that's killing us. It's literally killing us. You got people running around here with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, dying from diabetes, cancer's running rampant. Every time I turn around and look online, somebody's dying from cancer. And so you say, well, what's going on? It comes from the food we eat and the air we breathe. Right. And so I don't want to come off like a conspiracy theorist, but a lot of the things that we use, our cell phones to our ears all the time, different things, the microwave, using the microwave, using our cell phones, driving in our cars, smelling, the whatever that's coming out of our exhaust. I mean, it's this environment is really killing us. So anyway, going back to your initial question of diet. Diet is extremely important. It's extremely important. Your diet can dictate your mood. Your diet can dictate your focus, how well you focus. Like if you have a poor diet, you're sluggish, you don't have any energy, you can't focus, you can't concentrate. So your diet can dictate that, which will end up dictating how you treat other people, right? Like, so diet is extremely, extremely important, brother.
I agree. And like I told you before, I'm an alkaline vegan. And the reason why I like to bring that comment up or bring that question up to a lot of people is because I noticed how my own mentality changed once I changed my diet. And I just noticed like a big difference on how I was just able to, I was able to be more tolerant with people. I wasn't always just jumping at the first thing that came my way that was negative. If I disagreed with somebody, it didn't have to turn into an issue. You know what I mean? Especially if it was somebody who looked like me. So I think that at the end of the day, a lot of people, once they are able to cleanse and get a lot of that stuff out of their system, that's kind of like poison in their minds, they will just have a different understanding about who they are for one, and actually, who they look at as their people. Somebody who's on the same team as them. So I appreciate that answer. And we're not going to keep you too long. I just have one more question for you. And this is going to be a real interesting answer, I'm sure. But my question is, all right, if you can go back into history and be a top advisor for anybody in the past, any leader in the past, who would it be and what would you tell them?
If I could advise them?
Yes.
First person came to mind was Garvey. First person that came to mind was Garvey.
Yeah.
Why? I'm not sure. I don't know if it's because I've been watching a lot of videos on, Booker T and W.E.B. Du Bois and people bringing up Garvey during those conversations. But I would go back to Garvey and warn him if I could, and say, brother, they're going to try to get you on mail fraud. I would warn him about the mail fraud. I would also warn him about the ships that he invested in, the Black Star Line ships. A lot of those ships were, it wasn't a good investment. They didn't know what they were looking at, and they were being sold ships, and so that was a bad investment. And so I think that if I could go back in time, I hope that I could carry something with me, because I think that I would carry, if I could go back in time. You told me I can go back in time, but you didn't tell me what I couldn't carry. I think I would carry Tony Martin's book with me, Tony Martin's work with me, and philosophies and opinions. I would carry back some literature that would show Garvey where he will go wrong if he continued, kind of like a cheat. I'm sitting here thinking of, I don't know if you're too young to remember Back to the Future Part 2.
Of course. I was born in 85, so I know.
Okay, brother. So yeah, Back to the Future, he, remember he had the sports almanac, and he wanted to take that to the 1980s because he grabbed that, so that he could gamble and win some money, but then, some stuff happened. So I would want to do something like that, like take some stuff from here back to show Garvey what's happening, in 2022, where, what happened with his movement, talk to him about, if you do this, this is what's going to happen, to give him some foresight, and so that he could better plan, because he led a movement. I mean, Garvey galvanized millions of Africans, around the world. I mean, to me, Garvey, yes, the concept of Pan-Africanism was here before Garvey. Let's be clear on that. So there was always for him, there was a concept of Pan-Africanism before Garvey. But I think undoubtedly, Garvey was the one that he was the closest to making it a reality, in my opinion.
I agree with you too.
Yeah, he was the closest. I mean, yes, it was, the concept was here. People were moving on it. You had Pan-African conferences and things of that nature. But I mean, galvanizing millions of people, buying ships, getting land in Liberia, building. I mean, come on. So I would like to go back and just tell him what went right, what went wrong, and so that he could have some work with some foresight while he's moving, and planning and doing things. And so if I had to advise someone, I think it would definitely be Garvey. It would definitely be Garvey. Because I think that he had made some different choices, the movement would have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I would love to advise him. I would love to advise him. I would love to also advise, I'm sitting here thinking about, Dr. King, man, because Dr. King galvanized a lot of people, both Black and white. Yeah. And I just wished that, I know he was fighting for civil rights. And then later it shifted from civil rights to the poor people movement, where he said, wait a minute, we need to be focusing on our economics, because what good is having civil rights if you can't even go buy a can of soda, if you don't even have the money or the means to go buy a soda in that establishment, but you have the right to, but you can't afford to go in there. So he was like, wait a minute, we need to shift it. So I think that if I had to sit down with him when he was leading the civil rights movement, and I believe at one point he was the president of the SCLC, right? The Southern Christian Leadership Council or something like that. But I think that I would sit down and tell him back then, Doc, civil rights are great, but we need to be focused on, political power, political and economic power. We need both. So that's cool. But, we need both. We need reparations. So I would love to sit down and have, because he started figuring things out. Yeah. But then he got assassinated, in 68. And so I would let him know, time's up, in April 68. But before, and then possibly try to detect, because I think, I'm sitting here thinking about the movie, The Butterfly Effect. Even if he wasn't assassinated, in April 1968, they would have eventually got him, whether it was poisoning him, whether it was shooting him somewhere else, they would have eventually got him. Because at that time, Dr. King was hated in America. And so his daughter, Bernice King, I know she called out folks, I think it was either this year or last year. And she was saying how, everybody running around here saying that they love Dr. King. But she said, when my father was alive, people hated him. They hated him. This government hated Dr. King when he was alive. And so anyway, I think that eventually they would have got him anyway. But I would have loved to advise him earlier and say, hey, you're fighting for civil rights, but not only should we be fighting for civil rights, we should be fighting for political power. We should be fighting for economic power. We should be fighting for reparations. And so I would love to, because I think outside of Garvey, he led a huge movement. Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X, the Nation of Islam, that was a very, very huge movement. And so I would love to sit down and spoken to Malcolm before that whole beef, with him and the nation. So it's a lot of leaders. I know you said if I could choose one, but it's so
hard
many.
to pick one.
Yeah, it's so many that I would love to sit down and talk to. It's so many of them. I would love to talk to Booker T. I would love to talk to W.E.B. Du Bois.
W.E.B.
Yeah, I would have loved to sit down and talk to all of those brothers and advise them on, what we should be doing and what 2022 looks like for Black people in America, and try to do everything in our power to prevent what's happening now from happening. Yeah.
And I think that what you're saying also kind of goes back to what we were saying in the very beginning about how, just imagine if these brothers wouldn't have had to unlearn and relearn stuff that that was kind of built into their foundation as they kind of initially grew up as a kid. And they were able to start from a place where from the very beginning, they were learning these types of principles and the type of information that they came to kind of understand and grow into later on in life. That would have given them that much more of a head start in the movement and in the fight. So maybe some of those things that, you would want to go back in time and talk to them about, they might have kind of already came to that understanding by the information that they were given from a child.
Absolutely. Absolutely, brother. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So that's about it. Unless you have any questions for me, do you have any questions about Flyshikis TV, the platform, or anything for me personally?
No, brother. I'm happy to be on the platform. I appreciate just the invitation. I kind of looked through your YouTube already, so I know what you all are about. I've seen some clips and things on YouTube, and so I'm just looking forward to just seeing how this is going to turn out. Looking, forward to that, and just looking forward to seeing what becomes of Flyshiki Media. I applaud and appreciate what you brothers are doing. I know that it's going to grow into something huge, and I just can't wait to see it. Wait to see it blossom, brother. And so again, I appreciate the invitation and look forward to returning.
Oh, definitely. We definitely will be reaching back out to you to return. So we appreciate you for supporting us just as much as you appreciate it. So the feeling is definitely mutual. So with that being said, thank you for coming. My name is Flood, the Alkaline Investor. This is Flyshikis TV. And this is Dr. Ma'at. Make sure you guys check her out on all platforms. And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and stay up to date for the next episode of Flyshikis TV. Peace and love.
Peace.